Great to see everyone here. Thanks for spending some time with us to talk about cooling. Excited to dive into the topic. Just want to say a few words about Marble and who we are. So my name is Johnny. I'm one of the founding partners of Marble. Marble is a climate tech venture studio, which means we're a company that builds other companies, and we focus exclusively on deep tech solutions in climate. The way we do that is we partner with scientists, engineers, and operators to build these new deep technology companies, all focusing on topics that allow us to slash emissions, remove carbon, and cool down the planet. So our approach and our thesis is around what we call hard climate problems. And for us, what that means is they have to have a massive climate impact. So we talk about a 1% impact potential per company, meaning either 1% of emissions or 100 million people adapted to the worst impacts of climate change, where new deep technology or deep science-based opportunities exist to be able to bring something new and meaningful, a step change in that particular problem. And we go after big markets that are venture scale through that process. Typically, that process is a 3 to 12 months journey. So we have a first 3 months, which we call explore, where we work together to find the most interesting solution to the problem that we want to solve. And if we find something, we work together through create, which is 9 months, where we turn that individual into a co-founding team into a pre-seed stage company. And then for the successful companies, we spin those out as a new business. And we also invest 250,000 euros in cash to kickstart their adventure in hopefully doing something meaningful in climate. Marble was launched in 2021. We ourselves are backed by top climate investors across Europe and the US, about 50-50 in terms of our capital. And our objective is to build 20 companies in this first vehicle by about mid-2026. We finished and funded our first 6, and we have 10 in various stages of development today, looking at very interesting and exciting problems. And I'm very, very excited to tune into what could be an exciting future opportunity to build with us at Marble or elsewhere in the clean cooling space, and join some of the portfolio that we've already built. So the 6 that we built, to give you a flavor of the types of things we like to build, we have 3 in chemicals and fuels. So Airlium, looking at methanol, Sentium, looking at ammonia, Vema, looking at hydrogen. We have 2 in carbon removal, Blue Mineral, and a stealth company that is working on ultra low energy DAC. And then today we have 1 big play in adaptation, Atmo Cooling, looking at how we can terraform and cool deserts on a multi-hectare scale. I think I'm now going to pass back to your host for this event, Walter, and let him introduce the topic, and excited to follow along with you all. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you, Johnny, for that intro on Marble. And thank you, everyone, for joining today. I know it's morning in the Pacific and evening in Europe, so we have all time zones represented. You know, I don't think I need to tell this audience this, but the world is warming. And a consequence of warming surface temperatures is that we need air conditioning, right? Globally, air conditioning will be critical to adapt. And RMI recently forecasted that the amount of energy going towards air conditioning will increase by 3 to 5x over the next 30 years. Additionally, if you look at the market for air conditioning, both in emerging markets and more developed markets, you'll see the amount of air conditioners deployed grow substantially. However, this is this is an acute climate challenge. So ACs today use a lot of energy. On the left, we have a figure here that compares the annual energy usage of France against the global AC energy usage. And what you find is that globally, we use 5x more energy on AC than a country like France uses in a calendar year. And the consequences of this is we're stressing energy grids, and during really hot days, we're causing blackouts. Or to supply that energy, we're increasing our reliance on peaker plants, which are greenhouse gas intensive. Additionally, today's air conditioners rely on refrigerants that are potent for the environment. They have large global warming potential. So if we look at the 100-year global warming potential of a hydrofluorocarbon and compare that to CO2, it's about 2,500 times more. And putting everything together, AC-related emissions annually can be estimated to be around 1.8 gigatons per year. Our total annual emissions is about 53. So that means AC is responsible for about 3 to 4% of global annual emissions. Now, there are solutions, right? So there are a variety of technologies that we can be super excited about that will be transformative in terms of lowering the energy usage of air conditioners. So the first is desiccants, where you dry air prior to cooling. And that can lower the energy by up to 90%, as well as lowering the refrigerant-associated emissions. Similarly, there are new driving forces, solid-state technologies, that are completely refrigerant-free and also can have large energy reduction potentials. Some folks are exploring novel refrigerants such as water, CO2, or ammonia, which, while might not have direct energy reductions, will lower the refrigerant-associated emissions. And finally, another transformative approach to air conditioning is coupling existing technologies with low carbon and low energy sources of heat, which will reduce your overall energy reduction and will also lower your refrigerant-associated emissions. And these technologies, they are being commercialized. So there's a wide variety of startups in the space across all the different technology categories I just discussed. And we'll dive into a few of them in a sec. And so with that being said, I really want to just jump in. I'm very excited for this terrific panel we have with Nicole from 2150, Ankit from RMI, and Trevor from Mojave. I apologize for that typo there. And I will let the panelists introduce themselves. I think a great first question would be, what got you excited about decarbonizing AC in the first place? Nicole, if you want to start, that would be exciting.
Of course. So hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. And thank you, Walter and Johnny, for organizing this. I'm Nicole, and I'm an investor at 2150, a venture fund focused on sustainable transformation of the urban environment. And in terms of what gets us really excited about cooling technologies is the impact they can have. We think about cooling as one of the main levers for protecting ourselves from the impacts of climate change. And I'm talking about survivability here. So it's not just about being comfortable, it's about saving lives and doing so in the areas that are most vulnerable. So it's about human health and climate equity, and that's why we're really excited about new cooling technologies.
Ankit, do you want to go next? I think you're muted, Ankit.
Oh, sorry. Thanks for having me, Walter. Hi, everyone. Ankit Kalanki, principal with RMI. I lead the global cooling program at RMI. We look into innovative solutions through our accelerator program, Third Derivative. We look at some key geographies like India, where we have teams focusing on the cooling sector. And then globally, we really look at the different market and policy mechanisms that are needed to transition the market to better and higher efficiency cooling solutions. And what really kind of excites me and perhaps I see as an opportunity here is just the impact. If we purely look at the numbers, there's a UN report that recently came out which said 4 billion people will be exposed to deadly heat conditions by 2030. And the total economic loss because of the heat stress will be close to $2.4 trillion. Just those numbers, are mind-boggling and just kind of really make it more important to have and to provide access to cooling to millions and billions of people around the world today. And I think it will take innovative solutions as well as creative market and policy mechanisms to kind of make that happen. So all of that opportunity that comes with that challenge really kind of excites me.
Trevor, if you want to introduce yourself as well.
Great. Yeah, my name is Trevor Wendy. I'm an advisor with Mojave Energy Systems, but I have my own practice in helping businesses like this grow and get in their technologies into the market. I got interested in air conditioning as a field as I was looking about almost 20 years ago, I was at McKinsey's energy practice, and I was looking into, or we were collectively looking into greenhouse gas abatement. So McKinsey put together a pretty well-known greenhouse gas abatement cost curve in that era. And one of the really interesting findings was there was a lot of negative cost, or in other words, profitable greenhouse gas abatement. So we, of course, dug into that and did a whole other report on that, which was around figuring out what this was mostly energy efficiency and why wasn't that being exploited. And we came up with a number of addressable issues in this area that made me feel like this is really an unexploited territory. And that was, more than 15 years ago. Have been working mostly on this ever since. But in terms of if you look at the Sankey diagram and where the energy is going, HVAC is a really big portion of that. And it's the biggest portion, I would argue, that has not had a really disruptive innovation happen in the last few decades. So it's really well positioned for that. And it's an exciting and interesting field.
Thank you all for the intro. So, I think a takeaway from everything that just was talked about is this is a huge climate problem. And so my first question is for Ankit. And I'd love you, Ankit, to talk a little bit more about what are the policy and financial tailwinds for creating a new cooling company or for launching some of these very efficient technologies.
Yeah, I think when you talk about financial tailwinds, I think market opportunity is the first thing that you kind of, it comes to mind. And if you look at the large parts of the global South countries, all of those countries will see more and more demand for cooling. The stat you just showed, more than 3 billion air conditioners getting deployed between now and 2050. Most of those will get installed and will be operated in hot and humid parts of the world, Indonesia, India, Latin America. So big market opportunity exists there. And interestingly, all of these regions have very low penetration of air conditioning today. So as people move to urban centers, as people's income rise, you will see more demand for air conditioning and more people being able to afford air conditioning. And so there is a big market, which is a tailwind in itself. And I think from a policy standpoint, I think there are, again, a lot of efforts that are being put together by governments, local, subnational, national governments. You are seeing heat action plans being developed by municipalities and local authorities, really emphasizing the need for providing better access to cooling to people. At the international level, at the federal government level, there are agreements and collaboration commitments being made. I think the most recent was the Quad announcement between US, India, Japan, and Australia, where they made commitments to do more R&D on innovative cooling solutions and support manufacturing and supply chain development across. And that really kind of includes high efficiency cooling as one of the key areas, that these 4 countries will collaborate on, which is, again, a great kind of policy tailwind there. And then finally, I think there is also an increasing recognition among the regulation bodies that the standards today are inadequate when it comes to the needs of air conditioning and where it will come from, the humid parts of the world. And I think there is a growing recognition that we need to make amends to the current rating systems so that we can recognize those innovative cooling solutions much better.
Right. No, I agree. And, given these tailwinds you just discussed, Ankit, an open question I have for everyone is, why is it when I go to a Walmart or a Target, can I not find a transformatively efficient air conditioner? In other words, why are these technologies just not out and available today? Why are the Daikin's, the Carriers, and the Trains not innovating there?
I'll kick it off. Thanks, Walter. So I think the first problem actually is that when I go to the store as a consumer to buy my air conditioning unit, what I am actually looking at is the sticker price and not the energy efficiency label. So even if the most amazing technology is out there and it's on the shelf, I'm probably not buying it. And what it means is that on average, the units that we're buying are less than half as efficient as what's technically out there. And then there's the technology of it itself. So yes, there is like definitely scope to improve the efficiency. But when what drives consumer behavior is the upfront cost, that's what people are going to solve for in their innovation. I mean, to be fair, there is innovation happening at the incumbent OEMs. So I don't want to say that there's none. Like, for example, Daikin is known to be working on like magnetic cooling technologies, which would be in that kind of transformative bucket that you mentioned. And then also when you look at like the global cooling prize, the two people who won it were both incumbents. So there is innovation happening. It just takes time to get to market. And what we hope for is that when it comes to market, we, the consumers, choose it. And the main thing there is the focus on upfront costs.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Trevor, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, if you have that table, I think that'd be helpful to look at. So I agree absolutely with Nicole. It's a lot about that first price. There is innovation happening, but you can look from this table and see basically that the innovation is not as much or not nearly as much as one would expect. So the left hand, well, these are the categories of energy use of products that you'll touch that use a lot of energy. And that first column with numbers is what percentage of the total cost of ownership is the energy that you use during the lifetime of that product. And you can see for lighting, for example, that's very high. And for other appliances, it's quite low down at the bottom. But you could think of that as an incentive for suppliers to increase the energy productivity, right? So the higher that number, the greater the incentive. And you can see that lighting over the last 30 years has gone up by 800%, right? Moving from incandescent to fluorescent to LEDs. Vehicles went from internal combustion to very easy to get electric vehicles now that have a 400% increase in energy productivity. Refrigerators, another one. Whereas air conditioning, which still has that characteristic, Nicole was talking about the first cost, that's the remainder, right? That's the opposite of what's in here. So just a quarter to at most a half of the total cost of ownership of an air conditioner is that first cost. So you would think that there would be a really strong incentive to improve the energy productivity, because that would make the product itself much more valuable, like in these other categories. But you can see it's dramatically lagging here, and it's barely better, if at all, than other appliances which have a much lower energy consumption or a higher first cost in relation to that. And so this shows how little innovation actually has happened. And it's a lot about that pricing dynamic. The manufacturers, they respond to the incentives they're given. The incentives they've been given over the last 30 years have been to reduce prices, because the consumers, and that's both in the commercial and residential space, but the end users, the buyers of this equipment, are very cost focused. And that is the main metric of comparison between the products. There's not a lot of transparency into why it works better or the total cost of operation over the lifetime of the product. And so they've evolved around this price competition, and that has gotten us to a point with very little innovation. You can look at the R&D budgets of these companies dwindling over the, that same couple of decades. They're really focused on manufacturing and distribution, and that's the incentive they were given. But that also makes it very ripe for disruption and presents a lot of opportunity for new technologies to come into the market.
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you, Nicole. Given that, looking at the emerging companies, the startups, I'd love to jump into what are the key challenges that startups are facing in the cooling sector, and specifically the air conditioning sector. Anyone is welcome to jump in for this one.
Maybe I'll take
Go
first.
for it.
Sure. I will actually say that I am seeing a lot of excitement and passion, and a lot of innovators excited about the cooling space and want to do something in the cooling space, which is great, and which is pretty exciting. I think we all would understand and agree that it's also a journey for a startup. They have to cross so many different, what we call it as valleys of deaths, right from developing a prototype at the lab scale all the way to commercialization of it. And there are so many aspects of it that need to be kind of worked upon. And they need continuous support and guidance throughout that. And I think that's a big challenge that, a lot of them just get absorbed in one of those valleys and struggle to really come out. And so I think that is one of the key reasons that we don't see a lot of startups ultimately reaching that, point of commercialization, even though we see a lot of startups that are really excited about and wanting to do something in the cooling space. And I think it's a combination of a few things that already, Trevor and Nicole talked about. I think there are market failures that prevent startups from really or investors or other market actors to really give that confidence to the startups. The biggest example is regulation. When I talk about the residential sector, for example, there are minimum energy performance standards that exist in most of the markets today, but there is lack of enforcement and there is not enough ratcheting up of those minimum energy performance standards. And therefore the industry is very well positioned to just keep churning out more and more and making it cost optimized for the consumers, and leaves very little room for new entrants to kind of jump in. So I think all those kind of market failures really make it challenging for startups, but at the same time, it's just exciting to see so many startups working on innovative solutions.
Right. So if I'm paraphrasing correctly, a big mountain to climb over, but many people are up for the task.
I agree. I see a lot of entrants into this space, but it is more difficult, I would say, than a lot of other areas with similar impetus behind the innovation. For one thing, this is very much hardware based. There are certainly software solutions that will improve how air conditioning is done, but there's the core of it's hardware, and that's expensive to develop. So it's a higher cost to develop. And then the market structure is difficult. You've got a concentrated oligopoly of players that all have very high manufacturing volumes. There's a lack of transparency on the consumer side in understanding the product, understanding its energy consumption with respect to its first cost, even understanding how it works and why one product would be better than the other, or what the important metrics they should consider for purchase are. And what that leads to is a really strong brand affiliation or brand loyalty. They've used a certain, train or carrier in the past, and they had a bad experience with one of the other ones, and they'll never buy the one they had the bad experience with, and they'll always buy the one they like. And that is a difficult structure as a new entrant to come into. But on the other hand, that's a high barrier to entry. But barriers to entry from a business strategy standpoint are favorable if you do come up with the innovation that cracks that nut and allows you to enter that market. So I would say there's a really strong educational component to what companies have to do in addition to just developing the better technology that makes this hard. You've got to get all this through not just the OEMs, but the engineers and the channels, the contractors to the consumer and down to the consumer. There's a lot of people that need to understand the product better, understand its energy use, make that more transparent, and somebody will succeed, right? There's enough innovations happening here, and there's enough of an opportunity that I'm utterly convinced, and I've voted with my feet for the last decade that I've been primarily working on this challenge. But certainly this is something where I think it's underinvested in terms of companies in the later stage and getting through to a real market penetration.
So I think this next question, that actually was an audience question, but aligns very well with the discussion we're having here. And I think everyone here, Nicole, maybe you would have some thoughts. What are some examples of some startups that have worked around these problems? How have they had go-to-market strategies that have been able to mitigate some of the risks that Ankit and Trevor have discussed? And what are suggestions that you might have about doing that as well?
Yeah, so maybe just one other thing to add on the conversation we were just having is that it's it's an early space where if I look at, for example, like refrigerant-free heat pumps, like half of the ones that I know of were founded in the last 5 years, a third of them were founded in the last 3 years. So like the last few years have been about working on the technology, building a market-ready product, and it's now coming time to start deploying and figuring out go-to-market strategy and really putting rubber to the road. In terms of strategies that we've seen, maybe to tackle the kind of risk aversion of like, this is a new brand, a new product. I always buy Train, I always buy Carrier. I don't know this new company. One of the approaches we've seen that's been particularly promising, especially for dehumidification technologies, is to focus on ancillary equipment. So ancillary equipment that can improve the energy efficiency of your existing air conditioning system without requiring a full replacement of it. So in that sense, if your ancillary equipment, you're not so sure that it works, at least your air conditioning system is still there. So that's one approach we've seen taken with particularly commercial dehumidification equipment, basically. And that also kind of points to, as we were speaking about the challenges of commercial adoption in this space and getting energy efficiency to take off and be adopted. The like initial price point keeps coming up as a recurring theme. But when you're looking for people who are more attuned to total cost of ownership, you're thinking about commercial. So a lot of the startups we've seen, a lot of them are focused on commercial deployments or deployments in the kind of commercial real estate space rather than the residential real estate space. And that's because you have higher attentiveness to both like the total cost of ownership and also policy signals. But it's also a different go-to-market strategy in terms of you're not competing on Google or on the shelf at Walmart with the Trains or Carriers. You're going through HVAC sales reps. So I would say, yeah, those are two kind of key components we've seen in terms of how people have gone about trying to address those commercialization strategy or commercialization challenges.
Just to double click on what Nicole had just been talking about, in terms of finding that people going into the commercial market, finding that right product market fit is more challenging in this industry than in most places. There are literally thousands of different air conditioning applications, right? A window unit versus a 200-ton chiller, very different requirements. Finding for the technology that you have the right application that lends itself to the technology and creates the most competitive advantage with the least development cost is a really big part of the formula here, right? So for Mojave, as an example, that wasn't just going to commercial HVAC equipment, that was going specifically to dedicated outdoor air systems, which is about 10% of the commercial HVAC market. And that's because those are the highest humidity loads, and that's where the desiccants do the most, that give you the most benefit. So really hyper focusing and finding the right commercial product market fit for your specific technology and approach is so important. I think that's the #1 factor here for any of these companies considering this.
Yeah, and maybe if I can just quickly chime in with one thought, which is, and maybe it's not applicable to everyone, but I feel that it's important for a startup to be out there and talk about their product and show data, and use the power of social media. Really, I mean, I think that's important in today's world to get people excited, especially in the early stage scenarios. And I think, yes, you want to be careful about what you can share and keep your IP, but at the same time, it's very important to let people understand, how your technology works and what are the advantages and what are the benefits and performance and cost and other things. And I think it's important that startups are going out there in conferences and trade shows, using social media to really get people excited about the technology and getting that word out there.
I completely agree. I mean, I think you just look at this sector compared to many others. We need to be the PR people, right? And the startups need that as well. That's just something I've learned from my sprint into this sector. I do want to get to the audience Q&A. I have a couple more questions, and this is for all the panelists. What do you think is the biggest opportunity in the cooling sector? Right? Intentionally vague. Could be a technology, it could be a specific problem, a region. I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts, given your different perspectives and backgrounds.
I'll go first. And I'll choose one, and maybe I'll come back with a second one at the end if nobody else mentions my second one. But my first one would be, I am actually really interested in residential cooling solutions. So commercial is in some sense more urgent because commercial HVAC lasts like 10 to 20 years, or actually 10 to 30 years. Whereas a residential system might last for 10 years. So when we're talking about energy efficiency, maybe there's like more urgency to get those commercial systems replaced. And it's also where price and policy signals are stronger. But when we look at kind of the longer term perspective, when you look at that increase in space cooling energy use between now and 2050, like over 70% of it is in the residential space. So we see a lot of startups going after commercial space cooling, and I would love to see companies going after residential space cooling. Yes, it's hard, but I'd love to see somebody who's cracked it.
Yes, definitely.
I have three that I want to talk about, but
Oh, perfect.
I'll stick to two for now, and then maybe the third one later. I think across any sector, and maybe more important for residential sector, I think we need better solutions for dehumidification, whether it's vapor compression or whether it's through more material science research, desiccants, other membrane stuff. But I think there is so much more opportunity and energy efficiency that we are losing because of having to overcool the space to draw that moisture out of the air. And there is a big opportunity there, which was demonstrated to the prize, the global cooling prize, and that is something that we just have to get better at in doing. And I think the second that I'll touch upon is refrigerants. I think we all know at this point that there is always a trade-off when you talk about whether whether you want to balance between environmental impact or efficiency or safety, toxicity, and all of that. I would really like to see a startup coming up with a refrigerant that has lower environmental impact, is safe to use, and does not impact the performance of the system. So I think that's an important area. And otherwise we'll keep seeing slow transitions and maybe not in some markets not even accepting some of the more flammable refrigerants. So I think a lot of perhaps research can happen in that space.
Great, definitely.
Well, Ankit stole my number one, so I'm gonna reinforce that one and take a second one following his example there. But definitely for me, the dehumidification component of air conditioning is very neglected. Right? It's not universally understood, but almost all air conditioning is doing two things. Right? Is cooling and controlling the humidity in buildings. NREL did a study a few years ago where they found that about 55% of all the energy use is actually going to the humidity control rather than the cooling. And as buildings become more and more efficient and better ventilated, that is going to continue to move in that direction. So, classical, the incumbent technologies, vapor compression does temperature control very well or pretty well. It can be better, but no technology on the market in a mass sense today deals with the humidity component of the load well. And that's where that upper left corner, that desiccants corner of your slide, Walter, really fits. And then the other area that is my second that I'm really excited about is just the ability to integrate using IoT and AI technology, air conditioning in a more comprehensive way, and think holistically about what you're trying to do with your mechanical systems in the building. And that's to keep humans comfortable and healthy inside the building. And you can accomplish that in better ways, in improving upon not just the mechanical, but the way that that senses the comfort and indoor air quality, the way it interacts with the humans that are in the space, the way even that it interacts with the grid and provides energy services outside of the building. And you can do all of that by kind of improving smart building technology and how HVAC integrates with smart building technology. So that's a huge category of potential improvement in the sector as well.
Great. I think these are such awesome opportunities. Let's build companies that do it. My next question is actually an audience question. And I think it's relevant for given that about 30 to 40% of the people here today are in climate venture backgrounds. This question is saying that most of the next gen cooling startups are expected to be capital intensive. How confident are we that the investment landscape will be mature enough to support them?
I'll start. So yeah, if you want to start from day one with a $200 million plan, it's going to be super hard. That might not be possible, but there are ways to scale up incrementally. You start with something that's maybe a little bit more artisan looking, a little bit less manufacturing looking, and you get your first units out in the world, and then you can start to streamline things. But yeah, I think we are talking at the scale of tens of millions, not the scale of many hundreds of millions for plants. And I also think there are things that you can do that are smart around where you build facilities to take advantage of funding that supports job creation. So there is government funding available for facilities in places that have lost many jobs. And so if you are looking to build a facility there, you could get government support. So I think there are ways that you can be smart around where you build that help you to get incremental support.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. Ankit or Trevor, do you have any additional thoughts on, fitting AC air conditioning technologies into the traditional venture model?
Well, I would say, I have faith that the venture model will figure this out over time and figure out how to fund it. But at the same time, in the immediate sense, not depending exclusively on venture funding is really the biggest thing, right? So if you can hybridize, maybe you get a little venture funding, but you've got some government funded, DOE funded projects that you're working on, or specific, contract research or things that you can do to fund the business as you develop the product. Even debt financing, because these are hardware intensive industries. You can use a debt. There's a lot of working capital financing and things like that. So creating a spectrum of capital sources and trying to kind of create the best mix, it doesn't get around the problem, but it at least minimizes that within, your total capital needs issues.
Right.
And maybe I'll add a couple of thoughts. I think what's important to build that confidence among investors is really finding a right target application. And I know Trevor touched upon it. I think it's very important that startup finds the right target application and demonstrate and shows that it's possible and can meet the customer or consumer requirements, has the data to back that up. That is what really builds investors' confidence. You don't have to necessarily go and compete with the big shots and in the mainstream markets, but there are certain applications that can really benefit from innovative solutions at small cooling capacities, and it's important that those kind of white spaces are identified early and then developed, and then from there on you can obviously find paths to scale as you can get more people excited about it. And then there are opportunities in the business model innovation side as well. I mean, when I say business model, I'm not an expert on how it's done, but maybe some things around, even in the US, contractor is such a big element of what gets deployed ultimately, and how do you make sure that contractors are trained and incentivized to kind of make the right decisions and coming up with solutions that can help drive the market towards better solutions is itself an important area as well. So there are different opportunities that early stage startups can really look at to build that confidence, and then take it from there to kind of scale up.
Yeah, this sounds like no easy task, but doable.
I was just going to add maybe one other thing is that like not every startup in this space needs to build a full air conditioning unit all on their own, right? Like some of them are going to be making component parts like dehumidification membranes that then get integrated into the value chains of like the OEMs. So it's not that every single startup needs to have a giant manufacturing facility once they hit full scale to make their like the entire air conditioning system themselves. So that's one other thing to think about is if you are a component supplier versus a whole system supplier.
Yeah. You know, as a quick follow-up that I have, Nicole, and something that I've been thinking about a lot is how should startups think about engaging the OEM majors and engaging their CVCs? What would you recommend and what would you try to avoid?
I mean, I'll start. Maybe Ankit and Trevor have some other thoughts to add, but I mean, in the residential space, I think there is a lot to be said about partnering with an OEM. You can do it alone, but if you partner with an OEM, they already have the kind of distribution access. They already have all of that set up. It's going to take a long time. It's going to probably take longer than you think it will. But I guess, I mean, to the sense that it's a concentrated industry, there's only maybe like 3 or 4 that you need to convert anyway. In the commercial space, I think it's much more common to kind of do it on your own, rather than partnering with existing suppliers. But yeah, there are many paths, and I think it's early on in the journey to say which ones are the right ones to go down. But yeah, especially in the residential space, given the brand power, I think if you are a component supplier, there's a lot to be said about trying to early on build those partnerships with the OEMs.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll just piggyback on Nicole's point there. If you look at the OEMs today, especially the large HVAC manufacturers, except very few of them, I think most of them rely on other contract partners for their for the supply chain. Very few are fully vertically integrated. So that's where I think there's a huge opportunity. If you can really make a great membrane or a heat exchanger, I think that's definitely a big opportunity to get OEMs excited and partnership. The partnership opportunity with them exists there. And then second thing I'll say is maybe that Trevor mentioned in one of the questions is the data and the software and optimization side of the things. I believe a lot of manufacturers are trying to get better at, and there are studies out there that show that still with vapor compression, you can improve 20 to 25% of the energy by ensuring that it's used at the right time, and in the right way. And so there is opportunity around how you can use software and better algorithms to really make your system operate smartly. And I think, again, that's an area where OEMs, in my experience, are very open to exploring partnerships with startups and other companies.
Right. Trevor, given that Mojave does focus on the commercial application, I'm curious about how your thoughts on engaging OEMs and CVCs might differ from Nicole's.
Well, it's very much a double-edged sword from the startup point of view, right? It's there's obvious synergies. Nicole enumerated those, especially in manufacturing and distribution. And brand recognition. But on the other hand, especially with the oligopoly structure, what they are typically trying to do is get a competitive advantage on one of the other incumbents. So they're usually asking for an exclusive arrangement, and that limits the upside of your technology, right? You will only ever get an addressable market of what their market share is. And they do move a lot slower than the pace of a startup, right? It's a large company. It's not in a super progressive industry that's had a lot of change. So they're less innovative and move more slowly and cautiously with innovative products. So it does slow the introduction of the product down. So I think each startup needs to look at their, both sides of that equation and see which path is best. For Mojave, we thought about that for a long time and talked to all of the OEMs and ended up going alone. And that was the right decision for Mojave, but it's certainly not one size fits all.
That's a really great perspective. Yeah, Nicole.
I was gonna say, Trevor, do you think it's more like commercial versus residential? I mean, there are a few.
Yeah. Certainly, the manufacturing scale is a huge issue in residential, right? Because it's they're making hundreds of thousands of units per SKU annually, right? Whereas in commercial products, there are certainly products that they sell 100 of a SKU or even fewer, right? So you can be competitive at a much lower manufacturing volume as an independent in commercial or in certain applications within commercial, whereas in residential that scale is required to be cost competitive. And so it's a bigger advantage in residential, but I think most of the rest of the math stays roughly the same.
And maybe, Walter, if
Yeah.
you may allow me to ask a follow-up question to Trevor, how soon in a startup's journey should they be thinking about whether they want to actually do in-house manufacturing or license? And what do manufacturers, how open are manufacturers to that? Any reactions on that?
Yeah, so in my opinion, that should be thought of from day one. You have to build a business model around that. But on the other hand, it can't be 100% decided until you're fully into the market, because you need to have the option. If you do pair with an OEM, you need to have the option just to get the right negotiating leverage of going it alone also, right? So if you make the decision, I'm going to partner with an OEM, and you've got 4 potential dance partners, you might not get a very good arrangement. You might not get a good deal out of that. So you have to keep the ability to go alone open to have that negotiating power. And I think it even will break up for certain technologies that for some products based on that technology, they should partner. And in some products, other products based on that technology, they're better to go alone. So you might even end up dividing the company. But it's a day one question because it's fundamental. But at the same time, in my opinion, you can't finalize your decision until after the company is well into the market. So it's something that's always under process in a startup for good reason.
Right. That looks like a very challenging negotiation to manage. I think there are many examples of working with OEMs that have gone well, and then there are issues with like Gradient and Medea, right? I'm sure we've all seen that photo. So this is changing gears a little bit, but I do think it's important to address, although it could be the topic of a whole nother webinar. What are your thoughts on district cooling and passive cooling? What are their roles in the energy transition and in decarbonizing AC?
I can share my views. I think passive cooling certainly has a big role to play. I think, especially again, going back to where the demand for cooling is going to come from. If you look at those geographies, and there are statistics around it, close to 50 to 70% of that construction has not even happened yet. That will exist in 2050. So there is a big opportunity that we build our buildings the right way and design those buildings in the right way. And I think passive solutions are going to be critical piece of that, so that you reduce the cooling demand in the first place, and then you can meet the necessary demand with more efficient solutions. So you have to kind of take a 2-step approach there. And again, there are different solutions and technologies being developed, from insulation to better windows, novel cool roof materials, PDRC or passive daytime radiative cooling. So there is a lot of innovation happening in that space also, which is pretty exciting. But I think it's an important element, especially in markets that are going to see a big demand for cooling.
Right, I agree, and I think the CapEx heaviness and the infrastructure change for both of them is challenging, but passive cooling and coatings that do passive cooling is something that we've been interested at Marble as well. Another thing that has been mentioned in the chat as an interesting business model is cooling as a service. I would love to know, have any of you seen that as a successful business model? And is that something startups and or investors should be considering when looking at companies?
Well, having looked at that myself quite a bit, I would say it's certainly worthy of consideration. The question is, why would you do it, right? You would want a business model innovation when there is a market failure. And as Ankit pointed out earlier, there's a lot of market failures in air conditioning. But in particular, I do think this addresses a couple of important ones. One is aligning the incentives or the agency between the first cost and the operating cost of the equipment. And the other is to, sort of to gain scale or purchasing power within, an individual entity. There's clearly, there's clearly incentives to do it, but at the same time, it's complex and it's a little bit, I would say, fraught from a bureaucratic perspective.
I think there might also just be a point around there's like a time and a place, which is to say it might be a great solution for some types of deployments, but there might be other ones where cooling as a service misses a bit of the specific example I'm thinking of is, for example, in like third-party owned solar systems, like that is eligible for tax credits. But I don't know if that is true for heat pumps, for example. And so you wouldn't want to miss out on government tax credits because somebody else technically owns the unit in your house. So I think there are going to be like intricacies around like local context and local incentives that can sway the case for one way or the other.
Yeah, I think these are great points. As a final audience question, there's been a lot of interest in how you would evaluate some of these more emergent technologies like caloric materials or thermoelectrics against some still emergent but more established technologies like next-gen desiccants and alternative refrigerants like CO2 or ammonia, etc. I'd be eager to hear what thoughts you have about that.
I can start, which is to say, I mean, Trevor mentioned it earlier, the air conditioner does two things. It removes humidity and it also cools the temperature. And to that extent, I would say we need a stack of solutions. So I think there is scope for winners, both in kind of the dehumidification space and also winners in the like actual temperature reduction space. And so, yeah, stack of solutions, I think, can actually be collaborative with each other, and we can combine them to get even greater decarbonization benefits.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I would just to reinforce that point. I don't see these as being that cannibalistic with one another as they all come to market. The area of greatest cannibalization is in the carbon savings, right? Because as you improve that, there's less additional carbon savings to get, but there's still economic benefits, there's performance benefits, there's features and usability benefits that come from these different technologies. I think there's room for everyone. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity. This is a multi-$100 billion market, and I certainly think you could have several companies of various technologies all make it to profitability in the next decade or so.
Right. There's no one silver bullet, right? And I think what we're finding is that there are many different regions. Somewhere more humid, desiccants is going to make all the difference. Somewhere drier, these alternative driving forces are really attractive. Ankit, do you have anything to add on this discussion?
I think, I mean, Nicole and Trevor covered it well. I'll just say that it's important that we find the right solution for the right application in the right market. And I think that's going to be very important going forward.
So I think the final question of today is really addressing a lot of our audience members work at startups or working, we have a lot of professors in the audience as well. You know, I would love each of you to give them a piece of advice about commercializing and creating winning cooling technology companies. I know it's a challenging sector to build in.
Yeah, I would say, you know, a very easy one that comes to mind is don't neglect go to market. It has a complex structure in this industry. It's a multi-tier distribution model. It's different for residential and commercial, and even within commercial, it's different for comfort and applied cooling. It's the go to market and figuring out the chain or the channels for you that are going to have the right incentives and be the most motivated to get your product into the market and finding that is very important.
Yeah, maybe building on that, just it's important to understand what the customer wants, and addressing those metrics, you know, and ensuring that those metrics are part of your development right from day one when you're developing your first lab scale prototype. You know, you have a clear understanding of what performance levels, COPs you need to achieve for a given application. What is the ROI in that market the consumer typically wants. I think as you are kind of going through that commercialization journey and working on your roadmap, I think it's important to have a very clear understanding of what metrics customer wants and how do you kind of get to that.
And I'll maybe take the easy path and say Trevor and Ankit have given such great advice that all I can say is if you're building a startup in the space, come talk to us. That's all I got.
What a great note to end on. And so I want to thank all of our panelists today. I also do want to share that cooling is something that Marble is really excited about building a company in. And so if this is something you're interested in, my email will be shared afterwards, and let's chat. But thank you, panelists, and thank you everyone for attending. Let's stay in touch.